We're going to look at the cross section through the spinal cord, which is also referred to as a transverse section. So if you were to cut the spinal cord in half and then look at it, we can see the histology of it as well as how it is connected to the nerves that go out and into your body. So the spinal cord has gray matter and white matter. In the spinal cord, the gray matter is on the inside. So we can put gray matter inside, and it's kind of like a butterfly shaped. The white matter is therefore on the outside. When we look at this, it looks something like this. This would be my cross section through my spinal cord, and this is down low. But you can see that there's an anterior surface and a posterior surface. So this would be the anterior, that's the front side, and this would be the posterior. So this is important because different information travels into the spinal cord, then comes out, and they travel via what are referred to as roots. So when we look at the anterior root traveling into the anterior, or we could call it the ventral root, this actually contains motor neurons. So it contains axons of motor neurons. The posterior or dorsal root contains the axons of sensory neurons. So sensory information comes into your spinal cord via the dorsal root, and motor information goes out of your spinal cord via the ventral root. So let's look at a diagram of this. So this is my dorsal root right here. And you'll notice that it's kind of interesting because it has what is called a ganglia. And the ganglia, the dorsal root ganglia, includes the cell bodies of sensory neurons right there. So cell bodies exist also in ganglia outside of your spinal cord. The gray matter, you'll remember, contains the cell bodies, and that's why it's gray. And then the white matter contains myelinated axons that transmit information up and down the spinal cord. These roots coming out, they're going to form the spinal nerves. And so spinal nerves have both sensory and motor information in them. So this would be the beginning of my spinal nerve. And you can see that motor information would come out. Now, this is relevant when we look at reflexes. So we could talk about spinal reflexes. And an example of a spinal reflex is that reflex that they test at the doctor's office, where they're trying to determine whether or not your spinal cord is working properly or not. So this is called the knee jerk reflex. And you probably wondered why they would even do this. If you have no reflexes, or if your reflexes are very extreme, like hyper-reflexive, this can tell them information about your spinal cord. So if you have a herniated disc, for example, sometimes your reflexes can be extreme, right? And that's one way that they can detect if there is a problem. So sensory information is going in, and the sensory information is actually from a special receptor. We haven't talked about receptors yet, but they detect sensory information, and then they send it up and into the spinal cord. And this particular reflex is integrated by the spinal cord, so the movement is not initiated by the brain. The movement is initiated by your spinal cord. So the motor neuron comes out, and when you stretch your quadricep muscle, because of the hammer hitting your patellar tendon, then what's going to happen is that your muscle is going to contract and it's going to cause your leg to move up. So this is a knee-jerk reflex is an example of a spinal reflex that utilizes those pathways into the spinal cord. Why do they do it? They just do it to make sure that your spinal cord is functioning properly.